Welcome. This is our wrap-up of the council meeting from Tuesday, October 27th. Actually, there were two of them, a special budget meeting and then the regular council meeting. And we're here with the local media and glad to be able to answer questions and talk about what happened that night. So let's dive right in.
Okay, well, Mayor, I'll start with you. And I'll start at the beginning of the meeting because there were two citizens who made comments at the start of the meeting. And they had to do with the situation up at Hillside Cemetery. I'd like to have you clarify that situation. What exactly is the issue that they expressed their concerns about?
Well, they were very heartfelt comments from both people that came, and we've certainly heard of this since they did do a cleanup in the cemetery. We've heard of this from a lot of different people, and as you can imagine, people have buried their loved ones in the cemetery, and many times people take decorations, all kinds of things that are really going in, and they did enact. Now, we've had a policy, I think, for 15 years that has never been enforced, where things were supposed to be cleaned up by a certain date. And this year, they did send out a lot of information before. There was a sign up in the very front that says items are going to need to be removed by October 1st. And of course, the confusion for the public is, well, you've had this policy forever, so why now? But they did go through and they did make the cleanup, and this really just took people back. I mean, it's so much deeper for people than just a cleanup. These are items that they love for the folks that they love. And so it's more, there's just more to it. The two ladies that came and spoke, if you were in that council chambers on that particular day, you could hear a pin drop. The heartfelt pain that they experienced from this was tremendous. And I called both of them the following day and expressed I'm sorry that this happened, and they were very thankful for that, but it doesn't fix really what has taken place. So we are looking into, we're getting more of an explanation on why it took place this year, and Justin Casperson, the Parks and Rec Director, he's been very upfront with people. For the people that have called him, they are doing what they can to make amends to the situation. He will be coming and speaking to the council, I believe, in our next common council meeting with an update and an explanation of why this took place, because of the impact that this has had to the citizens. A lot of people understand it. A lot of people understand that, especially with winter coming, you're going to have snow clearing and all that. Some things need to be moved. And even a lot of the people that were struggling with this, they understood it as well, but it didn't take away the pain. And both of these ladies that came, when I spoke with them yesterday, they were very happy to get a response, and they're looking forward to getting more answers.
Yeah, I think the mayor said it well, and I think by following up with them the next morning, that was a good thing. I'll be following up with them at some point too. We want them to know that we care about them as citizens and people who have a stake, so to speak, in the cemetery here in town. I think it has been coming for a long time, and maybe this could have been done better. I've already heard from Justin Casperson that that they've learned some things from this that will help them moving forward in the future as they try to keep the cemetery free and clear of obstructions. And it's a hard thing. I know we've heard over time. I've heard a couple people say, when there's a lot of things put around a loved one's grave, that's great, but then maybe the people with gravestones right next to them don't always appreciate some of the overflow. And that's not to be critical of anyone. It's all about finding a balance. But they put the policy out. They let it be known what was going on and caught a lot of people off guard. And we want to apologize to those folks, and we are doing that. And like I said, learn to go forward, that we can be on track with all the people who have loved ones out there, that they go visit the graves so that they know what to expect in the years ahead.
Yeah,
I'm mostly focusing on the communications plan that was talked about. Maybe one of you could, or both of you could explain what that is and kind of the benefits of that.
So I'll start with that. We have our communication director, Tom Locks, and David have done an outstanding job since they've come in to work with the city, and they've developed this plan with help from their communication committee, as well as, that Tom has done a great job of sending it out to city staff. Proof, can you add, can you take away, what can you do with this? And the essence of it is, now we actually have a plan, and Tom's point the other night at the council meeting was where he had a 7 or 8 step process. It was very clear that communication is more than just a press release. Our communication department wants to be in there as before the story even begins. So if there's a project, his analogy the other night was brilliant, I thought. If there's a project that's going to take place in 2023, they need to be brought into that now so they can start working on that so that citizens know what's taking place while it's in the idea phase, once it goes to implementation, so that it is not a big surprise. And then once it's all wrapped up, doing a survey or ending up so you can really put closure to it. It's a very aggressive plan. There's no doubt about it. It's one that the Common Council reviewed the other night, and they'll be going for final approval to this plan. It's an extraordinarily in-depth plan, and it is there where we're just trying to get more communication to the citizens so they know what is taking place. Not necessarily just the highlight of what's going on today, but what is there for us in the future, and the whole how we communicate not only with the public but internally. And so this is something that we're very excited about. It is not an easy task by any stretch of the imagination. The plan that he put forward the other night I thought was awesome. Very thankful to him, his department, and the communication committee. They've done a great job, and we're looking forward to the implementation.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Tom, ever since he's been here nearly 2 years now, has been talking to me about the fact that we need to be more consistent and more focused on our communications. You look at companies like Nike and Kohl's and McDonald's, when they put out any news releases or they have news conferences, they break out new products, it's very planned, very intentional, what they're trying to accomplish, how they're doing it, how they're communicating, what platforms they're using. Government has historically thought of themselves different than that. Like, well, we don't have a product. We don't make anything. We're not selling anything. Really? That's not true. We provide services, and we need to be acting like a business in terms of how we market and sell what we do, and how we put out information about how people can tap into us and access our services. And so this is all about that. It's all about the idea of how are we communicating? Are we consistent? Are we intentional? Are we informing the public and educating them about what they need to know? And how are we doing it? What's appropriate? Some people like local media, traditional media. Some people like websites. Some people like Facebook and other forms of social media. What types of platforms are best for what types of audiences? How can we make sure that we're hitting the mark? A couple of years ago, one of our council members at the time did a kind of informal survey in the zoo where he just stopped people as they're walking by and said, tell me your opinion on the following 2 issues, and he named them. And he found out, he had it on camera, he found out that most of the people said, what are you talking about? So, even though we here live in this bubble where we think everybody follows our meetings every week, there's people in the public who don't know what we're planning to do, what improvements we're looking at making. And we need to do a better, stronger job of reaching them. And this isn't going to solve everything, but I think it's going to make a big impact in that area.
Why did this, what kind of spurred this idea to come up?
Well, I'll start and then I'll hand it back to the mayor. A couple of years ago, we were having some issues we were dealing with the cable TV, and this idea had been bubbled up before and discussed. What if we had our own communications department? And not just cable TV. Cable's great. We have local PEG channels that get information out on a variety of things. But what if we went beyond that? What if we moved into the next chapter of the city of all the communication we do? And doing it, again, in a more focused and intentional manner to convey to the public. We need to tell our story. What the public thinks about us is you raise our taxes, you don't fix my street, that's their mindset. And if we don't tell them differently, we're not going to help them to realize how much street work we've done, what programs are available, what grants are available for them to tap into for fixing up their homes or improving their business. We have to be the ones doing that, and we really weren't. We really weren't proactively doing that. That I saw as a big impetus for this plan.
And realistically, we've seen a lot of great things happen where we're able to get more information out. One of the things since Tom has been here is we started to do many of our meetings on Facebook. So it used to be several years ago, people literally had to come into the council chambers, and not everybody has that availability, or you needed to have charter spectrum, it's on channel 991. Well, if you don't have cable or if you have another source, then what do you do if you want to get the information but you don't want to come out? So we've seen the audience continually grow on Facebook, and people will tune in and certain things, which is what Tom mentioned the other night, of having all of these different platforms, because certainly in today's times, people get their news and information in so many different ways. So you have to start with one, and we do all of our basics and then add and add and add, because we want to get the information out to the people. Now, I will say this. One of the first things we discussed was those two ladies that came to the council meeting. I cannot even begin to tell you the input that has to the council when people come actually physically and say, this is my issue. It makes such a big impact to everyone there. And so we're hoping that by Tom continuing to expand and expand and expand, working with our media partners, Main Street, Mackey, and really working with them, we can get this message out to even more and more people. Obviously, we want a majority of the information to get here, but we also want it to get out even further so people can see that Marshfield is a great place to live and to play, so come on down. It all starts with communication.
One of the bigger concerns that it seems that community members had, particularly a couple of weeks ago at the meeting, is communication between the police and community. Now, I know that that's not part of the plan. Maybe explain that a little bit.
Well, that was one thing. Again, this is what was very, very impactful is the fact of citizens came to the council meeting. Now, and the one that you're talking about, on this cemetery issue that we saw what took place on Facebook, and I had calls, Steve had calls, we've all had calls on the impact of the cemetery thing. But when the people actually came, it really prompted, I think, even more action. Prior to that, there was a lot of citizens, had to be a couple dozen that came to the meeting, and they were primarily upset there because they don't feel that they are getting the communication of what is taking place. And now, that is a slightly different scenario there, because we have all, myself, the city administrator, all the aldermen, we're not privy to the information that is there. So when you're trying to be, when you're saying we want to be transparent, we just can't be transparent on this. That doesn't go so far. So this is something where even maybe our communication department can work on why it's important, and maybe start getting that out, because while all of this is taking place, there's just no information as of right now to give to the public, and that's frustrating. Believe me, I'm the mayor of the city of Marshfield. I don't even know what these issues are. And the aldermen, we don't know what the issues are. We are just as frustrated as the public, but the public has and I understand, because it's hard for me to understand why we can't know, but our attorneys, we've gotten advice from not only our great city attorney, but the employment attorney have said that this is the way it's got to be to protect everybody, to protect the people that have made a complaint, and to protect also the person that the complaint was made about. So that's why it's so important. So slightly different issues, but we have to go with that. But the public still wants answers, and every day that goes by, it gets worse and worse. And I will tell you, it gets worse and worse for Steve, because I call him every day, and I know aldermen call him every day. What's the update? What's the update? There just is none yet until all the people looking into this have finished.
Here's my takeaway. You know, I've been in government for a long time, as I think I said at one of the recent meetings. I've been in government for 3 decades. And, you know, sometimes we do live in a little bit of a bubble. And in my mind, when this first started coming out, and I heard people saying that there was frustration, people didn't know the information about what's going on with the police chief's matter. In my mind, I'm thinking, it's a confidential personnel matter. It's an investigation. We can't talk about these things publicly. Well, I know that because I work here, and I've worked here for many years, and I understand how that works. If we don't tell the public these kind of things, they think we're not being transparent. So even in the midst of what we can't tell them, we owe it to them to tell them why we can't tell them. You know, like I said, sometimes the easiest thing, connecting the dots, it doesn't happen. I remember sitting at my desk thinking, well, don't they know that this is a confidential personnel matter and no one can disclose anything? No, maybe a lot of them don't. So I want to work with Tom. I've got a meeting with him next week to talk about some things. We haven't met for a little while. And I think how we communicate even things that we can't talk fully about now, for some reason, is important. At least they know that we care about them and that we are not looking to disengage from them.
Would it be safe to say that if the Parks and Rec Department had worked with Tom to inform the public that the regulations at the cemetery were going to be enforced, that it would have saved some of the heartache now?
You know, I think I haven't really got into it deeply yet with the Parks and Recreation Director, but I will soon. I think when he says we've learned some things, I think that's probably part of it. You know, you can do news releases and you can do signs in the cemetery and these kind of things. And I don't know all the things that they did. I'm still learning everything they did to try and educate people this year to not leave stuff out. But I mean, Tom obviously, with what he does, has access to many platforms. We just talked about the fact that people get their news different ways. Some do nothing but Facebook, some do nothing but check on our website, some do nothing but whatever. And we probably could have done better. I'd say that if Justin were here. And that doesn't mean we failed, but it means we need to learn. And the more ways you can get the word out to the people, the better, because they do get their information from various sources.
I'm going to answer it a little bit differently. The answer is yes. And this is something that in Tom's communication plan, even our administrator and our department heads are still learning this. To if you're going to do something, if you come up with the idea at conception, start there to get that information out, so then we as a city can say we've got all this out. But in Tom's communication plan that he has there, we're still working on city staff, meaning department heads and whatnot, to understand, to have him or David sit in on their meetings so they can really get an idea of what is taking place, and then they can get that out. Now, how they're going to get that out, maybe Tom does a release, maybe he does a release and sends it to the media. But yes, absolutely. That is something that I think we've learned. And again, Tom has talked about this type of thing for quite some time. But I believe that our department heads and city staff are still learning about that. But we've got to get better at it.
I don't disagree with that one bit. I think that the mayor's on track. I go back to the company model. You know, if the head of product development of Nike wanted to unveil a great new product, they wouldn't just go out and put, have a news conference or put out a news release. They'd talk to the people who lead the communication effort within Nike. Now, Nike's a lot bigger than the city of Marshfield, but it's a mindset. I think sometimes it's maybe been harder for some of our department heads who've been doing their jobs for 10, 15, 20 years or more. and they're used to doing some of this stuff themselves, to realize that now we have a professional here that can make sure that we are doing consistent, complete messaging. And it's been coming, but it's been slow, and I think this might help to jumpstart it a little bit. I'm hopeful that we can use it as a tool, not to lay blame or fault anywhere, but this maybe is an example of how we can make better use of Tom's skills and ability to get the word out.
Was it, because I wasn't there on Tuesday, but was it approved, and when will it begin if it was?
So it was the first reading, and so all of the information there, and we could certainly get you a copy of it. It's very thorough. All of the information was there, and now the aldermen have a chance to take it home, digest it, and between now and the next Common Council meeting, if they have questions, they'll call Tom and David with, hey, what about this? What about this? Does this need to be tweaked? And then it will go for final approval at the next meeting. And that way everybody has the time to really go through and absorb this, because this is a big piece of the pie. Normally, myself and the alderman, we get a package on Friday after. If we're going to have a council meeting on a Tuesday, we'll get a package the Friday before, and we've got the weekend to go through it and digest it. And many things we will just go ahead and approve. Something like this, Tom did we had the information in the packet. Tom did a presentation that night. But on something like this, it's so big, you want people really to absorb it, and then it'll go back for approval at the next council meeting.
Another thing we're talking about is the ethics board. Is that linked in any way, or maybe explain what that is?
No, it's not really linked in any way. Alderman Wagner, actually, he was on the council for a long time, took 2 years off and came back. I understand he was trying to do something like this before, but it is to have a three-person ethics committee, and there wouldn't be council members. They would be members from the public, because that's what the public wants, is the transparency. So if you have people that are involved that sit on it, there it kind of takes away the transparency. So you would have three people. Two of them would be elected by the Common Council. And then there'd be one person from, I believe, the Wood County Bar.
Right.
And they would be, and then that would be, so if a citizen makes a complaint, then it would actually be able to go to people who are, it's nonpartisan, it's not a political, they take a look at, here's the complaint and here's the information. Doesn't make sense to pursue, or doesn't make sense to dismiss. You know, in today's world, as we have all seen, if you turn on the TV for 2 seconds, you see the vitriol politically. And so this committee is really going to be there to go, okay, is this politically motivated, or is this something that we really need to look into? And it gives them a procedure to go through. So that all is very good, and it's citizen-based. So therein lies the transparency. Some of that. So there's a lot of good things. Some other things along with that the council has to consider is, the cost of something like this, because they're kind of realistically little mini trials. And then could there be legal issues involved with that as well? So the city attorney has gone through this, and the council had some very, very good questions on cost. And again, this was the first reading that took place the other night. The aldermen are going to take it home, go through it. If they have questions, call the city attorney, call Ed Wagner to get explanations and whatnot. And then at the first Common Council meeting in November, it will go to a vote.
Yeah, and I think to add one thing, at first it might be seen as like kind of a big procedure for somebody who may have wandered into bad territory as far as ethics. One of the things, though, that's in this ordinance, and I wanted to look back at it before I spoke, but it's on page 2, under Article 3, it talks about advisory opinions by the body. And I know I've heard this from Ed Wagner before. His thought is that a person who may find themselves moving into an ethical dilemma can actually approach the board and kind of feel it out to see whether or not these are waters that they shouldn't go into. my brother-in-law works for this company, the city's talking about getting into this deal, and all these kind of questions that might come up in some way, shape, or form, you could actually proactively find out, get an opinion from the board as to whether or not you might be going into some trouble spot. So it's not just after the fact, it could even be before, to make sure that we're doing things as ethically as we humanly possible can do.
Okay. I think that might be all the questions that I have.
So I had a follow-up to the issue about the cemetery. Then Alderman Wagner was, he didn't really hide his displeasure at the meeting, and then made reference to, gosh, correct me if I'm wrong, disciplinary action? He said something about he would leave it up to the city administrator's discretion in terms of, did somebody, mess up to the point where they would face some sort of disciplinary action? He was talking, I think, specifically about the Parks and Recreation Director. Is there anything to that issue at all? Did he, not do something to the point where there would be some sort of action taken?
Well, since the meeting, I've spoken with the Parks and Recreation Director, and we are going to be meeting to discuss this more, and I need to get up to speed exactly with what employees did based upon what direction. But I'm just going to boldly say it's premature to talk about corrective action in this case, and I'm not trying to be, negative toward Councilmember Wagner. But what we really want to do is find out what happened, were things followed the way they were directed to be followed, and did we do things right? Can we learn from this? Can we apologize? Can we help people, get back their belongings? And can we be in a place where next year and in years to come, we have a better understanding between ourselves and the residents? Yes, if something was done not in accordance with personnel policy or in a way that rises to corrective action, certainly. But I have no reason at this point to believe that that's the world we're in right now.
There were a couple of agenda items having to do with benefits. Right, and it says, well, one said none for information only, the other approved HSA contribution, but employee benefits, when you add all those up, that's a pretty sizable part of the budget that I don't think people realize how much we're spending. Can you maybe just talk about what was presented at the meeting and where to from here on those issues?
Sure, I'll start with that. Our HR director, Jen Rakey, has done just a phenomenal job. And we really take a look at all the benefits, because you're right, they are costly. And many times when you look at a job, people do get kind of center focused or tunnel vision on a wage, but there's so much more than that. The one thing, the good news that we did find is that we did really good on our benefits, and so we actually saved a little, so that is really what's there. And that's really what the presentation was about, to kind of show how we've done well. We started Care My Way, and we've done other things to really help reduce the overall cost, where the folks can come into a private area and call and speak with a physician, and that's done well. And there's a lot of little things that we've implemented to help out with those costs. And then the other thing was just to continue with the HSA going the way it is. So it was very informative. Basically what came out of it is we did pretty well on our benefits. So we didn't have any real major increases with that.
Yeah, I'll add to that. The health insurance is such a large part of our budget. It's about $3 million is what we spend on health insurance. And we've had some bad years, in the last few years. And this was the first year in quite a while that we got under 100% utilization, which means that, we're finally looked at more positively by a carrier, in that we are now no longer spending $1 of claims versus the $1 that we pay them in premium. And as a result, we've saved some money, and we got down to a 3.5% increase, and we're going to try and encourage people who might be interested to take a program called Simply One. It's offered by Security Health Plan. That would save us even more. That would be where they would commit to using only Marshfield Clinic facilities. If they do that, they'll save a lot of premium, so will the city. But that's a decision every person, every family will have to make. But as far as the HSA, it's like 4 years ago we started trying to get people to move to the HSA, and that was hard for some of our employees. I mean, there's prescription drug costs that a lot of families face, and those are outside of the bounds of what usually works well. A lot of families with prescription drug costs that are high don't want to go to HSAs. But we moved people there, and as part of it, we did provide an incentive, and we do make contributions to the city's accounts for their health savings accounts. That may not go on forever, I would guess, but given what the employees have done in terms of better use of our healthcare dollars, better customer awareness, shall I say, we've saved a lot of money. They've helped us save a lot of money. It's good that we can provide some assistance back to them as the costs continue to rise. So I think it was all in all a good report about where we stand, and we're going to keep trying to control healthcare costs even more in the years ahead.
Just follow up then, there was a closed session item, possible assistance for proposed development projects. Anything to report there?
Nothing. It was closed session, so nothing to report.
Nothing to report, okay. Anything else from the meeting?
Did you want to go over
Do you want to talk the budget, or?
the budget at all, or no?
Well, that was, okay, so then the meeting before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the update there, and where is that process at now after, I think was the second
Yeah.
budget meeting, so.
Correct.
Where do things stand after that one?
Pure frustration from my perspective. Now, I will say this. City staff, Steve has done an amazing job. I mean, I cannot even say that enough with everything that he has to deal. So when I say frustration, it's so irritating, the hole that we were in and why we're there. And now, the other side of this is we know the hole that we're in, and now we have to move forward. But this is, let me just do a real short version of it. Basically, it's come out that we are, to make our product is $10.31. What we've been charging for our product is $9.54. And that discrepancy has been there now for over a decade, for probably 11 or 12 years.
Yeah.
So when you look and you've got to go refill that, it's not like you can just cut expenses. So what we talked about the other night was a twofold scenario. Number one, we have to, what will cutting expenses do? It will take that 1031 and maybe it can bring it down to 1020 or 1020, I don't know. It can bring it down a little bit. But we're not just going to cut our way out of this. We still have to catch up, because if you do no real tax increase this year, what we would face next year would be, Ron Alman, our finance director, said you would never come out of it. It would be a disaster. So we know we have to do something. So we asked city staff, we asked Steve to go back to his department heads, and I know that they have been doing feverishly to go back and see if there's some things we can cut. You know, one thing that I saw and that I went on was travel. Travel was up, in my opinion, too high. I wanted it to be, if city staff needs to travel or do anything, it should be for certifications and recertifications only. There's an argument that can be made, and that is a very good argument, that sometimes you go to these things and you bring back good ideas and everything. I agree with that, but within reason. Right now, we're in a year with COVID where we have to, in my opinion, knock all that other stuff out. So that's being reviewed to see if it can go from where it's at. Maybe it can come down a little bit. Maybe it can't. But we're going to look at it, and they're looking other expenses. So this other part here, so realistically, when we meet on Monday, it's going to be, how far did we go down from the 1031? But just understand this. We are in such a state of 12 years worth of just things being done wrong that we're not just going to be able to cut our way out of it. So there's going to need to be some sort of increase. To get everything would be upwards of 80 cents. That would just be too much. The one that Steve and Ron proposed is 43 cents. So our tax rate to go up 43 cents. What does that mean to the average person out there? On their $100,000 home, their taxes would go up $43. If they have a $200,000 home, their taxes would go up $86. There are some people out there that say, well, that's not that much. You spend more than that sometimes when you go out to dinner. But there's a lot of people out there because of COVID that are strapped, and $43 is a lot of money. What should have been taking place all along is going up maybe 1%. If they would have done that all along, it really would be no big deal. Steve did a great analysis of that, and if we would have gone up just 1% every year, which would be 6 or 7 cents a year, nobody even would have felt it, we would not be in this position that we're in today. So the people that, the tax rates that were there for the last 10 years, those people benefited, and now it's definitely going to have to go up. But even when they go up 43% or 43 cents, that doesn't fix it. That gets it more manageable. There would probably have to be more next year. Then once we get everything to balance, then the cuts that we do will be more in line.
Yeah, Bob covered a lot of, a lot of territory well there. What I would add, I guess, is the fact that there is no silver bullet. I know when the thing with the TIF transfers first came up, and Ron and I looked at it before we started talking to Bob and the members of the council, we said to each other, there's not going to be a silver bullet. We're going to have a structural budget deficit we're going to have to deal with. It's going to be, cutting expenses. It's going to be limiting borrowing in years to come more than we have. It's going to be tax increases to some degree. We don't know how much, but it's not just one, unless you go to Las Vegas or you win the lottery, you're not going to see it happen in one fell swoop. But I think out of the conversation, we had some good things come up the other night. Staff was working on some things. I totally respect the mayor on the travel. I've hit on that hard with the council or the department heads the next morning, and several of them have already submitted to me some cuts. I'm going to be looking at them later today and getting back with them and looking at the list myself. So we want to be prudent. I made a big thing at the presentation of how our general fund expenses are up only 4% over last year and how minimal that is. But still, that doesn't mean that there's not opportunities to trim further. Along with that, the council is going to have to come to grips with, I think, where they want to land on the tax rate. We proposed 4.5%. I did, making it clear that wouldn't solve everything, but at least it would be making a good stride toward where we need to get to. My only concern with whatever the tax rate is when it's all said and done for 2021 is that we can say to ourselves and to the taxpayers and to the financial advisor and the rating agencies, we're making strides. We're not treading water. We're not going backwards anymore. We're making strides. So, we're going to talk about some opportunities on Monday night with the council, and they'll see some things that we can do, and maybe we'll go farther than we're talking about. But we want to try and make sure that we're making progress so that, whether it takes 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or whatever to get where we need to go, we're on that road in a meaningful way. Not pennies, but we're on the road in a meaningful way to get to a better place. And I think we can make it. I think we can do it. There was a lot of conversations about use of other funds. Sometimes that may be prudent, sometimes it's not. And I think you'll see now that we've gone through all the department budgets, I think you'll see Monday night be a good, long conversation entirely about the final product for 2021. And I think we'll get to some place that hopefully people will say, okay, I wanted the tax rate to be higher, or I wanted the tax rate to be lower, or whatever. But we found a place we can live with for 2021. Now let's continue to stay up on top of it, as our finance director has done with us, regular updates to the council and the finance committee, and let's move forward.
And Mayor, this is clearly an undertaxed type of thing, right? I mean, you look at what was happening. I mean, the council, this isn't, city officials, screwing up budgets and not crunching numbers right. Isn't this on councils the council, no pun intended, the buck stops there in terms of they approve all the budgets, right? I mean, they have the final vote on what a budget is going to be, correct? They pass the budget, so any lack of tax increase that should have probably been there is on the council.
I wouldn't go that far. Certainly they have a role. What happened was, again, just to remind everybody, we were using funds that came in from the TIF district to offset general fund costs that we shouldn't have done. And I didn't realize what was going on, and that's my fault. As a result, when I came to the council every year and said, look, before I start the budget process, are you willing to, do you want to have it flat for sure for next year? Are you willing to go up 0.5%, 1%, 2%, or the maximum the state would allow? I would say that. The state allows us maybe 4% this year. what are you willing to do to make sure we're funding our services? And the council would say regularly, they would say, we want to stay low. We want to stay down. Can you keep us down at maybe a 0.5% or less increase? So ultimately, they were directing, in a way, the budgets I brought forward to not increase the taxes, even to cover inflation. Having said that, they didn't really necessarily realize that the funds that were being used to offset, to make that possible, were not funds that we should be using. And I would suspect if they realized that, as was the case with me, they would have said either you got to cut more or you got to raise it a couple percent or 1.5%, so that we keep up with funding our services. So did they ultimately make the call that you're saying? Was it on them when they approved the budget? Yes. But if they were sitting here right now, they'd say, if we had known, we would have perhaps been more supportive of some level of increase.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk with Mike Fire, the alderman in District 1, he took a lot of responsibility for it. He said that the council pressured them to not do anything. I also spoke yesterday with Mr. LaFontaine, who's a former alderman, and he actually stopped being an alderman, and the reason was, he says, is because a couple people tried to go for tax increases and they couldn't get the votes. Now, so that's one part of it. The other side of this is the alderman didn't know, because to Steve, what he just said is right. When you look at the way the budgets were before, it said that the TIDs, we were in there and we were paying, that the TIDs were funded and by paying principal and interest. Now, a normal person thinks if you're paying principal and interest, that's a total amount going in there. That's not what was going in there. It was principal and interest plus more, but the plus more was not in the budget. So there would be no way that the alderman would know that. So when they were thinking, let's not do a tax increase, they're thinking, well, because we don't have to. Alderman Witzel the other night felt that they were deceived. I'm not going there or anything like that. But believe me, that accounting method that was there before, in the private sector, there would be severe consequences to that. In the public sector, because you've got so many different things, and this goes back so long, there's really nothing that you can do to go back to do it. We're just left with what we have, and that's where we are. But to answer your question, yeah, the aldermen were, they certainly had issue, and even if they would have known realistically where we were, would they have made different votes to raise taxes? I think they probably would have, because it wouldn't have had to go up at 6 or 7 cents. I mean, it's not like it had to go up a lot. And six cents on a $100,000 house is $6. So it's a tough situation.
Yeah, and I will say my phraseology to them over those budget processes would have been different. Instead of me saying, would you be willing to go up 2 or 3%, so we can fund our services, I would have said, if you're not, then we're not funding our services adequately. So, I mean, it would have been, I would have brought it to them differently. I consistently got the message, no, keep it low, keep it low. And they might have said that anyway. They might have said cut programs and services to make this work. But they really didn't have the full impact of what would happen otherwise. I give them that grace. I do want to say one thing. I've said it before, but I want to say it again. It bears repeating. Some people hear about this in TIF transfers, and it just goes over their head. So when they hear about this and they hear that the city's going to raise taxes, their first thought might be, we squandered money. Was there even money embezzled? I mean, how could we find ourselves in this financial bind? It was none of that. The reality was that we were using money to fix roads and do all these other things that were good for the community. In fact, we were probably fixing roads beyond what we should have fixed, because we had the money that we probably shouldn't have been using. But these tax rate increases probably should have happened, again, 1% or 1.25% a year for many years. So what this is doing, and it's painful for people to hear this, is catching up to the area where we should have been otherwise.
So Monday, do you expect to wrap up, get through the list, or where are you on the list, and then they'll recommend a budget, or where's the...
Well, I'll start. The council's gone through the entire list. They've gone through all the departments and asked their questions of the department heads. It really is going to come down to the meeting starting with staff coming back and saying, okay, you charged us with looking at tuition reimbursement, or travel and training, or all these different categories, operating supplies. Here's what we found, here's what we are looking to cut. We are proposing these cuts to reduce the budget. Here's some other opportunities we see. You talked about maybe taking a little money from this fund or that fund. Here's what we could support as staff. And then the ball's really going to be in the court of the mayor and council to take that information, say, thank you very much, I'm glad to see that you're looking at cutting another so many thousands of dollars and that you think we might be able to use these other monies. We would like to go beyond that, or we would like to do whatever we think is right to come to a conclusion in terms of what amount of that reduction are we going to make in terms of the deficit, what is that tax rate going to be. That's going to be entirely our elected officials. That's why they get voted on. Nobody votes for Steve Barg. Nobody votes for Ron Allman. The rest of the meeting will be them, I think, talking collectively, Bob and the council, about where they want to end up with everything they know. And it's a weighty decision. We'll be there to answer any questions that they have. But yes, by the end of that night, we'll walk out of the room, I think, with a budget that we can take to the citizens later in November.
And there's basically, I think the easiest way to do it is, right now it's at 1031, our product is 1031, so with cuts, we're going to take it down to whatever that could be. It's not going to be enough to make up where we're at. So that's going to be one discussion, the cuts, and then the other one is going to be how much of this huge 83-cent deficit do we want to make up this year. And I've started to say since the very beginning, I didn't want any tax increase at all. It's just not even practical with what's there. It was so much worse. And I'm still just sick over the fact of the citizens have been through so much this year. I mean, just so much. And then now government screws up again, and it's going to go to them. That makes me sick. The other side of this is, as the mayor of the city, we have to fix it, and you have to move on. You have to move ahead. And we'll do that. And the citizens of Marshfield are resilient. This is taking everybody to do it. I will say this, Steve has done an amazing job. He's done it every year. This year, I mean, if he tears off that shirt and you see a big S on there, I think he qualifies for that. He's done an amazing job.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate the compliment. And I will say this so people understand as they follow this. For every 1% we raise taxes or lower taxes, it's $130,000. So when you hear 4.5% tax rate increase, that would be raising approximately $600,000. So again, the one thing I want council to know as they make these decisions about the tax rate is it's painful to increase taxes. I pay taxes like everyone else. I'm not thrilled about seeing my tax bill go up, but they need to recognize that whatever we get to this year, that is the starting point for next year. So we hope to make progress so that our deficit beginning 2022 is something that's a little bit more manageable. But again, they have to make the call. They have to talk to people at the cafe, at the restaurant, in their neighborhood, and they're the ones who have to feel comfortable with the decision they made and being able to represent why the taxes went up to whatever degree they did.